Happy New Day, CSA. Today it falls on me to deliver the lesson sermon, the first in my history of being at CSA. I'll do my best. Okay, my lesson sermon is entitled, My Journey with CSA. You know, sometimes when we meet, that is amongst ourselves, our brother disciples or brother sister disciples, we often ask the question, how did you get on the spiritual path? How did you hear about CSA? And then everybody tells a story, which is rather interesting. And I'm sure this question will always be asked, because we still ask the new people, how did you hear of CSA? What brought you to CSA? So today, this is my story of how I came to join CSA and my journey with CSA, what I've learned, and any transformations which have taken place. Okay, CSA was inaugurated in Ghana on the 3rd of June 1979. Before then, there was no CSA Ghana or CSA Africa. We just had CSA Lakemont. Why I'm saying that is because before CSA was inaugurated, I met Reverend Sasu. He had then just come back to Ghana from the US. So it's like I grew up with CSA. I had a classmate friend of mine. I went to Achimota School, and I had a classmate friend of mine, William Wattenberg. We were very close and lived in the same area in Labone. So he introduced me to like metaphysics, and I was interested in the subject. We used to have a lot of discussions and other interesting things. Maybe he would teach me one or two things, and then we would go on with our friendship and our metaphysics. So just before, in fact, he introduced me to Simpson's Bookshop, which was then around the General Post Office area. The young ones may not know about this, but the older ones definitely will know. And believe me, I think I may be right or wrong, but it seems Simpson's Bookshop then was the only metaphysical bookshop in Ghana. You see, and they were, I mean, they didn't mince words about it. Some people, there were lodges, there were people who had secret societies, and what they were doing, nobody knew. But as for Mr. Simpson, he didn't hide it, and like he was on the spiritual path, and he sold these books. So, but his books were rather expensive, and you had to save a lot of money before you go and buy even one book. So my friend introduced me to Simpson's Bookshop, and that was in, let's take it, 78, 77, 78, and 79. I then started my working profession with a bank in 1976. And I was stationed at Kofredua branch. So what I used to do was, I used to come frequently to Accra. I stay 1 week at Kofredua. The following week I come to Accra, 1 week Accra, 1 week Kofredua. So when I come down, I would go to Simpson's Bookshop and look at what they had. But as I said, the books were rather expensive. So it took, maybe I would save and then go and buy. So I think early 1979, I had saved some money. And I went to Simpson's Bookshop and bought 2 books. One was with in fact, later I realized both were written by Roy Eugene Davis. But the first book I bought was With God We Can by Roy Eugene Davis. And the second book I bought was The Sayings of Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Not knowing Roy had met him, and then he had written the book on Sai Baba, but I thought they were different books. So I wrote to the 2 places. I wrote to Lakemont for further information about CSA, and I wrote to the Sai Baba Ashram for further information about Sai Baba. Both of them replied, and Lakemont sent me some information, and Sai Babatu sent me some information. And then shortly thereafter, Lakeman sent a newsletter that Reverend Sasu was coming to Ghana to start CSA Africa. And he had been trained in meditation and various techniques. So, like I said, I was then at Kofredo, so I wrote to him. Those days, there were nothing like mobile phone. The most was a landline. It was post office writing letters that we were using. So I wrote to Reverend Sasu using the bank address. And he replied that, he had reached Ghana. He was in the country and showed me directions of how to get to him. So the next time I came to Accra, 1 week in Accra, 1 week in Kofredua, the next time I came to Accra, I came to look for him, and that was around the old CSA building in Adabraka. His parents had a shop there. So when I inquired of him, his father asked the store attendant to take me to Reverend Sasu, who was then at home. So this was my first meeting with Reverend Sasu, and like I said, it was before the CSA was born in Ghana. So when I met Reverend Sasu and I narrated like how I got to him, the first thing he told me was that, you see, when God wants to get something done, he brings the people and the circumstances together to get it done. And I've noticed that these are prophetic words, because over the years, even with this building, CSA, most of you don't know, but because I'm intimately linked with Reverend and what goes on here, this building, a lot of people who contributed, or some people who contributed big monies, have never stepped here before. They are not even CSA members, you see. But as Reverend said, when God wants to get something done, he brings the people and the circumstances together to get it done. Okay, the next thing I have to say is, we talk about CSA. What is CSA? CSA is Christian Spiritual Alliance, or Center for Spiritual Awareness. You see, before I joined CSA, or before I met Reverend Sasu, my mind on spirit, which I believe most people have, especially this part of the world, is very weird. You see, especially watching Nigerian films, and we see people reciting all kinds of things, their secret societies and all sorts of things. So our mind on spirit is very weird, which I also had those funny ideas. But luckily, along the way, they've been corrected. So Center for Spiritual Awareness, like Reverend says, is simply a place you come to know God. You understand? Not for any hocus pocus, any powers. But many people think that, you see, to display powers and all that kind of thing means you are being spiritual. That is far from it. So the other time I was telling some young men at CSA Ghana the other time that I asked them, do we become spiritual? And they said yes. And I said, no, we do not become spiritual. You see, we are already spiritual. If we become spiritual, then it means we can cause spirit. And if you can cause spirit, it means you can uncause spirit as well. So please, we do not become spiritual. And I just want to read something from An Easy Guide to Meditation. You see, Roy writes in An Easy Guide to Meditation, while in this world, you express as a spirit, mind, body being, with your spiritual nature remaining superior to the mind and the physical body. The truth is, the human condition does not become spiritual. When conditions are ideal, our spiritual nature awakens and blossoms, allowing us to clearly apprehend that we are but using mind and body, while the reality of us, our spiritual nature, remains ever what it is. All this I would not have known if Reverend Sasu had not come. So we are very grateful to him for coming to this part of the world to really enlighten us on what the true spiritual path is about. Okay, another thing is that when I first met Reverend Sasu, he noticed that I liked reading. So he gave me a lot of books. CSA, he brought a lot of good books. I want to say good books because not any other books. And unfortunately, along the way, people have borrowed these books and they have gone. They have never come back. But when I first met him, I had access to some of these books. One was by Alan Watts. The title was Cloud Hidden, Whereabouts Unknown. And if you know Alan Watts is a very funny person. And sometimes when I was reading his books, like coming to Accra, I'll read his books on the STC, or state transport, I'll be laughing to myself. And I said, the people will be wondering that, maybe this guy is getting mad. I said, yes, he's very, very funny. You see, and one of the things Alan Watts said was, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. You see, it seems like a paradox, but it is true. You see, the true teaching, or the highest form of teaching, is taught in silence. It is not, because God is beyond name and form, and he's beyond thought, you see. So I just want to read something from a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, which, this is my personal copy, but again, it was introduced to me by Reverend Sasu. It's a very helpful book. If you lay hands on it, I would advise you to try and get one. This is called, it has 101 short stories, all of them with a teaching. Every story has a teaching behind it. You see, I must state that when I joined the spiritual path, up till now, I'm attracted to the wisdom aspect of yoga. Those who do not know, we have like different aspects of yoga. We have bhakti yoga, which is like those who attain yoga through love. We have karma yoga, those who attract or attain yoga through service, but selfless service. And we have jnana yoga, those who attain yoga through wisdom. And I'm attracted to that path. So this one is called the Happy Chinaman. Anyone walking about Chinatown in America will observe statues of a stout fellow carrying a linen sack. Chinese merchants call him the Happy Chinaman or Laughing Buddha. This Hutai lived in the Tang dynasty. He had no desire to call himself a Zen master or to gather many disciples about him. Instead, he walked the streets with a big sack into which he put gifts of candy, fruit, or donuts. These he would give to children who gathered around him in play. He established a kindergarten of the streets. Whenever he met a Zen devotee, he would extend his hand and say, "Give me 1 penny." And if anybody asked him to return to a temple to teach again, he would reply, "Give me 1 penny." Once, as he was walking about his play work, another Zen master happened along and inquired, "What is the significance of Zen?" Hutai immediately plopped his sack down on the ground in silent answer. Then asked the other, "What is the actualization of Zen?" At once, the Happy Chinaman swung the sack over his shoulder and continued on his way. That is the thing. When he was asked that what is the significance, silence, and what is the actualization of Zen, he went about doing good. Another thing I learned is that, you see, spirituality should impact our lives in these areas: spiritual awareness, mental creativity, emotional maturity, physical health and vitality, and then financial stability. I want to go over them again. Spiritual awareness, being aware of who and what you are. Mental creativity, being creative in your thinking and acting. Emotional maturity, this is one area which many people will have to stabilize themselves in, because sometimes people are emotionally mature, and if you are emotionally mature or emotionally immature, you create a lot of problems for yourself and people. So emotional maturity. Physical health and vitality. If you remember, when we're coming out of meditation, John asked that our meditation should impact our health and vitality. And then financial stability. You see, there is no use being poor. You understand? And trying to justify it. You see, God is your father, and God can provide for you. That is why we say God is our source. So everybody who is worth his salt, every spiritual master, it is not, you see, Yogananda used to say that prosperity is not having tons of money in the bank. Your bank balance will be showing 5 billion or 5 million. But what he used to say was having what you need when you need it. So please, don't try to pretend that poverty is a virtue. Poverty is no virtue. So try to get something, and then, you see, if you don't have, people can easily influence you, sometimes in a negative way. You see, make you do things which you wouldn't really want to do. So try to make yourself at least financially stable. That doesn't mean that you do what is not proper. You see, what we say is you have to get without violating the rights of others. It is very important, without violating the rights of others. Those are the 5 areas which I learned that CSA is here for. In all this, I've not seen anything about powers, turning water into wine or walking into water, flying through the air. So please, let us forget about such things. There are things which, like I said, when we are immature, we think that that is what the spiritual part is about. In fact, when Reverend Sasu came to Ghana, he said that he contacted religious organizations in this part of the country. He intentionally did it. He wanted to know what people were teaching and all that. So when he comes to you and he says, "Oh, we meditate," he says, "Oh, show me, I'm interested." He said, bar none was able to show him proper meditation. You see, so we are very grateful that this work came to this part of the world to enlighten us. Okay. The next thing I have to say, the 5 things I was talking of, 5 areas of our life, which I was talking about: spiritual awareness, mental creativity, emotional maturity, physical health and vitality, and financial stability. You see, it tallies with the Hindu who say the 4 aims of life are dharma, which is righteous living; artha, which is wealth acquired through pursuit of a profession; karma, human love or desire of psychological values; and moksha, spiritual salvation. Again, there is no talk of acquiring all kinds of useless powers. You see, in fact, the CSA motto is, there is a power that runs this universe, and we can learn to cooperate with it. There is one power which runs this universe, and we can learn to cooperate with it. We don't use the power. In fact, you cannot even use the power, but you can learn to cooperate with it. Okay, like I was saying, when I met Reverend Sasu, then I bought a lot of books, of Roy's books, and most of those books are out of print now. For example, there was The Miracle Man of Japan. Maybe the older people, members of CSA, would have bought that one. The Way of the Initiate, and Darshan, The Vision of Light. You see, I realized that, in fact, privately, I discussed with Reverend Sasu that some of the Roy's earliest books were very useful, and if they could reprint them. So he said he realized that that is true. Most of his earliest books, which are out of print, are very valuable. So he will make every effort to have them reprinted, or some of them reprinted. And I hope when it happens, they will come here and then you'll get some of them. Then I remember that reading one of Roy's early books, he mentioned either Darshan, The Vision of Light, or one of his books, he mentioned that, like in his talking about himself, he went to CSA, Self-Realization Fellowship. That was when he also met Yogananda for the first time. And he went there, or arrived on the 23rd of December 1949. And on the following day, which is 24th December, they had an all-day meditation. And I remember this because he wrote it in his book. He said that during the all-day meditation, Yogananda said that God is closer to you than anything you know. He's even closer to you than your breath. Along the way, I found this statement to be very true. You see, if we practice meditation correctly, we will find out that our true nature, or our God nature, is very, very close to us. That is actually our true self. And then we will put away the false self, which is our other things. I'm sure most of you know about it. Okay. The next thing is that one of the books Reverend gave me was by Atta Osborne, Ramana Maharishi, and The Path of Self-Realization. In fact, in Roy's earliest books, at the back of the book, he would bring like small chapters on enlightened people. You see, sometimes it is good to read the stories of enlightened people, what their teaching is, what they say, and what you can learn from it. So I remember that Reverend gave me this book, Ramana Maharishi and the Path of Self-Realization, and that is one book which greatly influenced my being on the spiritual path. That book, well, I don't know if some of you have read about Ramana Maharishi, but I'll highly recommend that you read about this great saint who has made his transition. He lived in the south of India. And hopefully, when we go for our spiritual pilgrimage, which we are going to do in October, a few of us, we will go to the south of India and visit his ashram. In 2012, a few of us, that is Reverend Sasu, myself, Reverend Kwame Techi, and Ralph, we went on a spiritual pilgrimage to the north of India. That is our guru line. And it was very, very interesting. But India has a lot of sages, saints and sages. So this time we have decided to go to the south of India, you see, and go and walk and see how they lived and places they stayed for inspiration. Okay. Like I said, when I met CSA, they used to hold a lot of seminars. And I'm sure the older people would have attended some of these seminars. Some were held at the old CSA, some were held at the British Council, and they were very educative. And they would bring other speakers, apart from Reverend Sasu, CSA, other speakers from different churches were invited to come and give also talks on the spiritual path. And then you would notice that most of these people had no realization. You see, realization is a different thing from theory. You can recite the thing like a parrot, but realization is a different thing altogether. So I'll urge each and every one of us to seek realization. What it is between you and God. When you realize, as they say, you will know you have realized. Okay, on this note, I want to thank each and every one of you very much for listening to me. And maybe I'll continue in another lesson sermon. Thank you.